It is my absolute pleasure and honor to introduce our speaker this evening. This is a gentleman who makes his living inspiring young folks and folks of all ages and shapes, sizes, and all sorts of things all around the world. I first saw him speak when I was a leader a number of years ago. And I don't think he knows this, but I'd say he's definitely one of the reasons why I'm in this position right now. So I owe a lot of what I do here at Dal, and I think the committee members would agree to this guy and what I've been able to accomplish here, and what I hope you folks are able to take from this and really bring to your experience here at Dal and to the community, Halifax at large, Nova Scotia at large, and most importantly here at Dalhousie. So without further ado, please make some noise for the wonderful Drew Dudley. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks. Oh, thanks, man. I got one of these. Halifax. How you doing, East Coast? My adopted homeland. What? I love it out here. Here's the thing. I had something really bad happen. Like, if you're a speaker, one of the worst things that can happen to you is, oh God, you want me on the stage, right? This cool? You guys see me okay? Sorry, the leadership, what I want to talk about, like standing on a stage, doesn't really fit. I should have told you guys up there that, because all the people working the tech are like, you jerk. Can you see me? Get up there? All right. I forgot we're being simulcast. So how you doing, Truro? Can they see me now? All right. Something really bad happened to me as a speaker right before you come on stage. A really annoying song gets in your head, and it just runs the entire speech, and I cannot get it out. So for like the last 5 minutes, I've been pacing up and around there going like, who dat? Who dat? I-G-G-Y. And I could tell, like, the security guard, she's in the corner going, like, stop. Like I'm up in the corner about to go on stage and go, I'm so fat. And it's not going away. Like, it's stuck in here. So I'm thrilled to be back in Halifax. I flew in late last night to the land of the donair. And what is that? Like, I've spent 18 years out here on and off on the East Coast, and no one's been able to explain to me what donair is. And I know it is, I'm told it's delicious. I've never had one. You know why? Because no one's ever shown me what a donair animal looks like. All right? I'm not eating the meat unless you could be like, look, that's a donair. Then we kill it, then we eat it. I'll eat it. Like a cow, I know what a cow looks like. A chicken, but I've never seen anyone be like, look, a cute little baby donair. And last night I was at Mount A, and the guy's like, it's beef-based. Beef-based. Okay. Here's a little something. The next time you get in a new relationship, the first time the other person says, I love you, here's the problem with saying it's something based. And the first time someone says to you, I love you, look them deep in the eye and go, my feelings for you are definitely love-based. All right? So I am thrilled to be back here because this place is awesome. So thank you very much. I'm glad to get a cheer-based something off the top. So you're about to start classes on Thursday, right? Okay. So you're going to have a lot of older people asking you questions over the next several years, and I would like to be the first one to do it. So I used to teach leadership theory at the University of Toronto. That's actually why I'm traveling around the world now. Don't cheer for that, no. Okay? You have a much better school than the University of Toronto. I'm going to tell you that right now, okay? Crap, that's on the internet. And one of my clients is gone, all right? And I used to be the national chair of a charity that all of you are about to get up close and personal with called Shinorama Students Fighting Cystic Fibrosis. And I want to say, every year, Shinorama means the world to me, and I'll talk a little bit about it today, not a ton, but there's an important story tied to it. But I want to say thank you in advance for what you guys are going to do to support that charity. A wonderful friend of mine who I've worked with for 13 years to fight cystic fibrosis, she has it, and for the last 4.5 weeks, she has been stuck at the QE2, and I go by and visit her as many times as I can. My job is to bring her stuffed crust pizza. That's it. She's like, I don't really care about your company, but you bring food. But she is right now battling a terrible lung infection. She's been there for over a month on IV 14 hours a day, and so the work you're going to do tomorrow is helping to save the life of my friend, and I really do appreciate that, so thank you in advance, right off the top. Much love for helping out my friend Lindsay, all right? So please give yourself a hand for all the money you're going to raise tomorrow. So here is my opening question to you. How many of you, by show of hands, are 100% completely and totally comfortable with calling yourself a leader? You know, That's probably a little bit under a third of the audience. And that's too bad, because a third is my magic number, because I've asked that question to every audience for whom I've spoken for the last 5.5 years. I've asked it to 654 different audiences. And of those 654 times, only 75 of them has had more than a third of the people in the audience willing to put up their hand and call themselves a leader. And of those 75, 36 of them were children under the age of 12. Like, there's something about the term leader that the older people get, the more we act like we need permission to use it. Like, what happens is you hope that you make enough money, that you go to a good enough school, that you get a prestigious enough job, and once you do those things, some external person or organization looks at you and says, there is a leader. And people want that to happen because you want the world to know that you've been given this title of leader. But what I've discovered is without that external permission, most people, particularly young people, are hesitant to put up their hand and just claim, I am a leader, because they're afraid that it will call for a level of cockiness or arrogance that they don't want to be associated with. And I think that that reflects a society-wide tendency to make leadership into something bigger than us, into something beyond us, and they want to make it about changing the world. When we tell ourselves, if what I do every day at school and at work doesn't fundamentally change the world, then I have no right to call myself a leader. And I think part of how we teach it as you guys grow up, as I grew up, is every time we learned what a leader was, they gave us some example of a giant, some major historical figure, a president, someone who invented something that changed the world. We say, look at Warren Buffett invest, and look at Steve Jobs innovate, and look at Oprah create a global brand. And we say, those are leaders. And the problem with using giants as our examples for what leaders are is it makes most of us devalue the leadership that we are showing every day. And we start to let moments of leadership pass us by. We don't let ourselves take credit for them. We don't let ourselves feel good about them. The things that make us feel good, for better or for worse, are the things that we are driven to do every day. And the thing is, when we let moments of leadership pass us by and we don't let ourselves feel good about them, when we let our classmates and our friends and the people we love let moments of leadership pass them by, we don't make sure that they feel good about them, what we are doing is we are pulling leadership out of our campuses, out of our communities, out of the world, and out of our lives. And I think that we need it. Like, I've studied leadership my entire adult life, and I honestly want to tell you that I believe there's no shortage of leadership on the planet. I do believe, however, that we're systematically ignoring a huge percentage of the leadership around us every day. And I think that young people are some of the worst offenders at it. And part of it, I think, is it's really hard to feel like a leader when your whole life you've been graded by people older than you. Like, it's hard to ask young people to stand up and say, I am a leader, when for most of your life, the things that you've wanted, some older person has had to decide whether or not you get the good enough grade or you get the job. So it's awfully hard, I found, for students to say, yeah, I am a leader. And I was reminded of that recently because I was speaking at one of these big, prestigious business schools. And I know it was prestigious because it was on all their brochures. That's all you take. Just put it on enough of your brochures and people will be like, oh, prestigious school. Oh, yeah, I read that somewhere. And I love business schools because it's always a room full of professors and their students, and they're talking about innovation, creativity, and thinking outside the box. And they're all wearing the exact same suit when they do it. And at the end of one of those talks, there was this guy who came up to me, a young guy, maybe 18 years old. He comes up and he says, Drew, I've seen you speak 3 times this year, and I love the stories that you tell. I was like, sweet, thanks, man. And he goes, do you want to know what's wrong with you? And who turns down the opportunity to have a complete stranger tell you what's wrong with you, right? So I said, go ahead. And he says, you never tell us how to win. And I was like, win what? And he rolls his eyes and he goes, come on, man, this is a game we're playing. We all know it's a game we're playing. Like, we've known it's a game since the first time they ever gave me a grade. Like, why would they grade us if it wasn't to make sure they could rank us and make sure the people at the top got something the people at the bottom didn't get? Like, look, man, there's only so many jobs. There's only so much money. And if I don't get them, somebody else will. So you know what? I don't think you're telling students or doing students any favors by telling them there's some nicer reality out there. I think all you're doing is you're setting us up to get destroyed in the game. And if you really want to help us, I mean, you're a millionaire, man. You must have figured out how to win it. How about you stop telling us stories and start telling us exactly how to win? And with that, he spins on his heels, walks off, because debate sucks and he has made his point. All right? And you know how when you're driving home, all you can think of is like the best responses? You're like, oh, I wish I'd, yeah, that's right, what I do. But I started to think about it, and I realized, you know what, if I'm going to take an hour out of people's lives, maybe I do owe it to all of these amazing young people I talk to give you my best advice for how to win that game. So here on like day 2 of your life at university is my best advice for how to win that particular game. Please don't play that game. All right? No, there are no winners in that game. There are just people who have been beaten, I swear to God, okay? Because the problem is when we start to look at life as if it is a game, at school as if it's a game, at work as if it's a game, we start to believe there are winners and there are losers. And for some reason, most of the people I work with, they see themselves as losing somehow. Because it is always easy to find someone with better grades, someone who makes more money, someone with a cooler job. So almost everyone I talk to, no matter how successful they are, see themselves as kind of losing to someone. And once we adopt this idea that there are winners and there are losers, we start to adopt this philosophy that we live in a world of scarcity. And there's only so much out there. And anything that you get, any grades, any money, any jobs, is a little less for me. And anything you succeed at is a little less success for me out there. And I think this idea that we live in a world of scarcity, it's what leads to so many of the things of which we are ashamed in our society. It's what leads to greed. It's what leads to jealousy. It's what leads to people building their empires on the exploitation of other human beings. And it's what leads to the bullying that starts in kindergarten and goes all the way up to boardrooms and staff rooms. And my work, like the life that I picked for myself, is to try to convince individuals and organizations to choose to live in a different type of economy. Because I believe that right now, we are teaching you all an economy of scarcity. And I think that we can choose to live in an economy of abundance. Because I'm not going to blow smoke at you, okay? Maybe there is only so much money. And maybe there are only so many jobs. But I honestly believe, and I have seen, that there is no limit to the amount of self-worth that is available to you. There is no limit to the amount of satisfaction that is available to you. And there is no limit to the amount of happiness that is available to you. If we can find a way to separate satisfaction, self-worth, and happiness from our grades, from our job titles, and from our paychecks. And I worry that what we've done is we've set most of you through an education system that hasn't taught you that. What it's taught you is a bunch of rules, ways to definitely play by the rules and to win a game. And here's the problem is, I think most of the rules, maybe not most, but way too many of them, stand in the way of leadership, they stand in the way of success, and they stand in the way of happiness. So what I want to share with you guys today is some of the unrules of education. That a decade and a half working with students and with some of the most successful people running the biggest companies in the world, here are some of the things I wish someone had taught me on my first couple of days. Take the ones that you agree with, toss out the other ones. But I think we got to start here. Is please recognize that your life is not a sheet of paper. Because I did for way too long look at my life like it was a piece of paper. Because this is me right around the time where I was where you were. All right? Thank you very much. However, here's the thing. I'm still that guy. And no one made that noise when I got up here. All right? So all you've just done has been like you have let yourself go over the last 18 years, okay? Because that looked good there. That was me, 18 years old, just graduated high school, the mean streets of Peterborough, Ontario, Canada. That is right, home of the world's largest hydraulic lift lock. People are like, I cannot cheer, that just sounds weird, man. At this particular point in my life, I thought I was everything that you were supposed to be as a student because I had done everything I was told to do as a student. I graduated high school with a 99.3 average, and I was pissed about the 0.7, okay? And I was captain of the football team and editor of the school paper and president of the student union. Because only in high school can you control the government and the press at the same time. Nobody cares. Because everything I did in my education was to look good on paper. Like specifically one type of paper, a double-sided sheet of paper. My whole existence was about filling out this double-sided sheet of paper, this resume. And on it went all my grades, and all my work experience, my volunteer work, my extracurriculars, and my awards. And I became convinced, and I watched way too many students kind of adopt the same mindset, even though we don't realize we're doing it, that we have only so much time. We have from the time we start kindergarten until the time we are done university. And it's got to be university, right? There's no other real choice. Kindergarten till the time you're done university to work on that double-sided sheet of paper. And in that time, it can't just be good. It has to be better than yours, and it has to be better than yours, and it has to be better than yours. Because for some reason, I think we act, or I kind of believe, that essentially what happens is when on the day that everyone graduates from university, everybody's life, and that's what this piece of paper was to me, my life, gets put into a big stack. And someone, let's say a very severe-looking woman with giant glasses and a tight bun and a gray pantsuit, like stands behind the stack, and her job is to pick up everybody's life, double-sided sheet of paper that you've used 15, 20 years of your life on, and do this. Success. Success. Failure. And whichever pile you end up with at the end of your time at university, that's what the rest of your life would be. So don't screw around, and make sure that you make it amazing. And that is what I did, and I was good at it. And I got scholarships to every place I wanted to go. And let me tell you something about acceptance letters to Harvard, okay? Acceptance letters to Harvard are written on the heaviest paper you will ever hold in your life, okay? I am convinced that they write acceptance letters to Harvard on the crushed dreams of people who didn't get to go to Harvard. And guys, it is the most pretentious letter you will ever read. It's like, hello, we're Harvard. But you knew that, didn't you? Nom. I don't know, Harvard has always talked like that in my head. Like it's an actual person being like, no. And the whole letter is about how great Harvard is. Oh, well, wonderful, and we're good, and you probably heard of this. And guess what? At the end, it's like, oh, you're good enough for us. Bully for you, well done. And then, a few weeks later, I got a letter from a little school on the East Coast. Actually, we're on the East Coast. I don't have to explain to you where it is. I'm like trying to explain to Americans, like, no, east of New York and north, there's stuff. Like, forget New York. I try to explain to people in Toronto that, like, no, east of here, there's stuff, okay? And I get a letter from Mount Allison University in Sackville, New Brunswick, which, yes, cheer for, Peterborough gets love and no Sackville? Right. And Mount Allison's acceptance letter had 5 handwritten lines. That was it. Dear Drew, you should come here. I'm not kidding you. It said, Dear Drew, you should come here. We think we'll make you better. We think you'll make us better. Call me, Charlie, and a phone number. Charlie was the dean. Yeah. That is the East Coast, all right? My acceptance to Mount Allison was on the phone with the dean. I called up Charlie, and he talked me into Mount A. And I went to my dad, and I said, I'm going to Mount Allison. And he went, where? And I said, New Brunswick. And he goes, there's a mountain in New Brunswick? And I'm like, I assume so. They wouldn't call it Mount Allison if it was just a stupid little hill, right? Wrong. And he said, not Harvard? I go, here's how much they cost. And he's like, Mount A, go, Mountie, really? Mounties? I'm clever. So I pack up and I moved to Mount Allison in Sackville, New Brunswick. And I was still that student, though. I mean, I had to be the #1 student in first year. I had to be an RA right away. I had to be on student council right away. I was that student that on the first day of class, I wanted the prof to look and be like, I'm giving that guy an A. And you all know these students. And if you don't, you are that student, okay? And good for you. However, it killed me, all right? I was up all the time. I was stressed out. And then in my 3rd year, I met this extraordinary guy, and his name was Jason Abraham. Jason was the coolest guy I had ever met. Jason, you'll meet Jasons. You've met some of them already. They're the people who are friends with every group on campus. They move from group to group, party to party, club to club, arts, sports, doesn't matter. This man was the coolest guy I had ever met, and I had wanted to be cool since I was old enough to know that I wasn't. So like 4. And he was my manager at the campus bar, and one night after work, we got all honest with each other, and I was like, Jason, man, everybody loves you. Everyone's so, like, drawn to you. Man, can you teach me to be cool? Okay, first, never ask anyone to make you cool, right? And he smiles. He goes, all right, I'm going to tell you something my grandmother taught me. And when you go to cool school, one of the last people you expect to hear from is grandma, all right? And he said, my grandmother told me that your life is better the fewer times you put yourself into situations where you have to say, I'm sorry. And if you want to pull unnecessary I'm sorries out of your life, one of the easiest ways to do it is every time you talk about somebody, act as if they are standing directly behind you. Your life just gets easier. Every time you talk about somebody, act as if they're standing directly behind you is some of the simplest, best life advice that I have managed to ignore on an almost daily basis that I have ever been given. But that's not just how that guy talked, that's how he lived. And I think that's why he was such a big part of so many people's lives. And in February of 2000, he missed a couple weeks of work. And I said, what's going on? And they said, he's got the flu. So when you pack up and move he was from Brantford, Ontario, move 1,000 miles away, you don't get a new doctor. What happens is if you get sick enough, your roommates will eventually drag you to the emergency room. And nobody wants to go because you think, I'm not that sick, it's just the flu. They said, what's wrong? And he goes, I got a headache, I'm achy, I'm losing weight, I have no appetite. And in February, of course, the doctor looks at, man, you got the flu, 23 years old, go home, you'll be fine, sleep it off. He said, all right. A few more days go by, feels even worse. They take him back to the hospital, different doctor, same symptoms, same diagnosis. You have the flu, go home, sleep it off. It's a bad one this year. He lost 34 pounds in 17 days. And finally, his friends were like, we're taking you to the big hospital in Moncton. I love that I'm somewhere where that joke is, people understand it, all right? So they go to Moncton. And the doctor says, what's wrong? They gives him the symptoms, and the doctor says, hey, you have the flu. And his friends freak out. One of them closes the door and says, he's not leaving till you run tests because he doesn't have the flu. And the doctor was like, no, he's got the flu. And his friend was like, you're not getting out of this room until you run some more tests. Here's some great life advice for you. You know the friends that you have to keep with you, the ones who will be complete dicks on your behalf, all right? Those are the people to surround you with in life. Because they finally ran some more, fine, we'll run some more tests to get these college kids out of my office, right? They come back out, or they bring him back into the hospital a few days later, and they're like, Jason, there's a tumor in your stomach. You have cancer. And they said, but this is one type of cancer, if you catch it early, we have a really good cure rate on this. So we're going to fly you right to Toronto immediately. We're going to get the tumor out, and we think you have a great chance of making a full recovery. So they fly Jason to Toronto and go in to do a tumor removal. But when they go in, they discover that the cancer is everywhere. There wasn't a single symptom until it was too late to do anything. And they had to come out and tell his girlfriend and his family that he was never leaving the hospital. They said it might be a week, maybe 2, but he won't live a month. And why I love my school out here on the East Coast, and I talk about them and all the amazing places out here everywhere I go, is because they decided that they wanted this guy to be a graduate before he died. And that's the type of thing that these schools do out here. And he's never coming back, and he had 4 courses still to go. And the Senate got together, had an emergency meeting, and voted to give him his university degree. And not only did he vote to give it to him, but the president brought his 4 best friends into his office and said, we are having you deliver it to him. We're going to pay for your flights. We're going to pay for your hotels. It's all on the university. Your job is to give him this message. We are so proud that you are an Allisonian, and we wanted to make sure you get what you came for and give him this degree. And they put it in this beautiful scroll holder. They flew his 4 best boys to Toronto. They walk into the hospital, and he goes, what are you doing here? And they said, everyone is so proud you're our friend. The school is so proud that you're a member of the community. And they wanted us to tell you, they wanted to make sure you got what you came for. And they held out his university degree. And my whole life was that piece of paper. Like everything I had done was for that piece of paper. What I believed truly was whatever I wanted out of life, you couldn't get it without it. I honestly was kind of led to believe that if you had it and other people didn't, you were kind of better than they were. And they held this thing out to him, which everything I'd ever done had been pointing towards that. And Jason looks at the piece of paper and he looks at his boys and he goes, get what I came for. Guys, I didn't go there to get that. I went there to get all of you. I have everything I need from that school and tell them I'm so honored, but if I can't get it in May, I don't need it. My life wasn't about that. And he wouldn't take his degree. And that went around so fast around campus. And I heard it when I was 23 years old, and it was the first time in my life it had ever occurred to me that anyone would go to school for some reason other than to finish it. There's some reason for not to be a stepping stone. Unfortunately, he didn't get to get his degree. Jason died on the 27th of March, 2000, which is 1 month and 9 days after they said he wouldn't live a month, and it was 12 days before he turned 24. And this man's death changed everything about education, everything about leadership, and everything about life for me. Because when he died, I saw something happen I had never seen happen before. I watched an entire town go into mourning. I mean, it's a small community, and the students, the staff, the people who'd made pizzas, the people who drove the cabs, everybody acted like they'd lost their brother. And I had never seen a single human being matter to more people in my life. And my whole life had been about being able to answer other people's questions. I had felt so successful because any question someone threw at me, I could answer. But it was always someone else's questions. Very rarely did I ask tough ones of myself. And the day of his funeral, I was there, and I asked the toughest one I'd ever asked of myself. I looked around, and I said, Drew, what if it was you? Like, what if it was you who was never leaving the hospital? Would this many people care? And when your whole life you've been told you're doing it right, you're valedictorian, other students and teachers are like, just keep getting these grades. Like when your whole life you've been told you're doing it the right way, to realize that the answer to that question was no, that not as many people would care, that messed up my world. And I held up my double-sided sheet of paper in my head next to this man's, and I realized that on paper I was so much more impressive than this guy. But he mattered more than I did. You know why? It's because he planned to matter every day. Like he lived every day to say good things about people who weren't even in the room. Everyone that this man touched, he wanted to have a positive impact on. He lived his life to matter every day, and I realized I was living my life to impress people I'd never met yet. Like when I was in high school, I was living my life to impress admissions counselors. When I got to university, I was living my life to impress people who would one day hire me. And then I wanted to get someone who would one day give me a raise in an executive position so that all that would one day impress someone enough to say, I'm going to marry that guy. My whole life, I realized, was to impress people I hadn't met yet. Don't live your life to impress people you haven't met yet. Make sure that you're living your life in this extraordinary community to have an impact now. Because if you matter to the people around you every day, you're going to impress all of the people you meet going forward. If you can honestly ask yourself, am I living my life for the people around me today or for people I haven't met yet? And you can stop doing it today, because the biggest difference between me and Jason Abraham was that I was living my whole life when I was young for that piece of paper. And he was living his life for the guys that brought it. And I think that we all need to remember that we have to live today, because you're not here to train for life. You're here to start making a difference now. And the clubs and the people and the passion and the energy that's around you in this room and around this campus, you will never again be in a place with this much youth, this much energy, this much passion, all willing to work for free. All right? Make sure you seize it. How do we do it? Well, I think one thing we got to do is take the time to define the things that we want to define us. Like I gave my first lecture at U of T, I was 28 years old. And I talked about leadership the way I'm going to talk about it at the end of today. And at the end of it, a young girl came up to me and said what every single educator on the planet wants to hear at the end of their first lecture. She comes up and says, I don't get it. And I said, what don't you get? And she says, I don't understand leadership anymore. And I said, that's okay, we have all semester to figure out what leadership means to you. That's why we're doing the course. And she says, no, I understood leadership before I came to your class, and now I don't understand leadership. Which is kind of what I want to happen now. At the time, I felt like I'd let this tuition-paying student write down. And I said, okay, specifically, what's confused you the most, and we'll work on it together. And she said, I'm an international student, and where I grew up, we were always taught that the smartest people are supposed to be the leaders. The smartest people are the ones who get the best grades. So if you get good grades in school, it's your way of showing you deserve to be a leader. And if you don't, it's your way of showing you're not ready to handle the responsibility. But after listening to you, I think that leadership means something different in Canadian. We'll talk about whether Canadian is its own language later, eh? But Americans love that joke. So she says, can you explain to me what leadership means in the simplest terms possible? And I'm the coordinator of leadership development at Canada's biggest university at the time. Leadership's in my title. I run a company with leadership in its name. And so I open my mouth to give her my brilliant, well-researched answer. And you ever been asked a question you're certain you know the answer to until someone asks you the question? And then your brain starts having a really awful discussion with itself? Like the left side's like, you've got this, right? It's like, no, I thought you did. And then you realize you've just been staring at the student for 12, 15 seconds. So I did what professors do when one of you guys boggles our mind with a question. We go for the glasses. Well, what do you think? And in the many times I've done that to students, she's the only one to ever go, I don't know, that's why I asked you. And so I said, well, why don't you go home and think about it, and we'll open up the next class with a discussion. And she goes, oh, thank you. No problem. Glad I could help. But I was really upset. Like, I went home and I was upset because leadership was a fundamental value I wanted to embrace and embody every day of my life. And this woman asked me the most basic question, what does it mean? And I choked on it. And I realized that, you know what? A lot of us are doing that. One of the greatest pieces of leadership advice I was ever given was when you don't know what to do in a situation, ask yourself, what would the person who I want to be do in this situation? And then do that. Amazing advice, really hard to take, because most of us actually don't know who we want to be. We just think we do. So allow me, if I may, I'm going to take you through a hypothetical that I gave myself that night because of that young woman. And I'd like all of you to do it, but hi, how are you, in the front row? Yeah, oh my, that was a terrible noise you just made. She's like, Here's the thing, if you sit in the front row, it's like at Marineland, you might get like, I'm sorry, every upper Canadian in this room from Ontario now is singing the song in their head, aren't you? Like I said Marineland, and immediately, without even thinking, you're like, happiness is. How are you? Can I bring you into the presentation? What is your name? Kylie, okay. Kylie and everyone else, but Kylie's the one who has to answer for you. I'd like everyone to imagine this hypothetical. I have someone follow you around for 3 weeks, and you don't know they're following you, and you don't know what just that tone of voice I'm using is wrong, okay? You don't know they're following you, and you don't know what 3 weeks ago. Her name is Abigail, and no one named Abigail has ever been a bad person, okay? It's just... She follows you around for 3 weeks and sees every interaction of which you're a part, okay? She watches how you interact in public, private, online, and virtual, okay? She sees how you interact with people that you love, with people you cannot stand, with people that you interact with for just a few seconds when they serve you coffee in a restaurant. At the end of those 3 weeks, I sit her down and I say, you followed Kylie around for 3 weeks. They followed every one of you around for 3 weeks of your life. What are the 3 fundamental values that she stands for above all others? What are the 3 values that she wants to embody more than any others in everything she does? What 3 words do you hope that person says after watching you? Happiness? Happiness, kindness? Happiness, kindness, and love. Those are 3 really, really good answers. Now I want you to imagine that young woman walks up to you and says, I'm sorry, I've never heard the word happiness before. Can you explain what that actually means in the simplest English possible? What do you tell her? Happy whales? Yeah, there you go. You're not sure, eh? Imagine if a 4-year-old walked up to you, and 4-year-olds will ask you the best questions ever. Like if you have a little brother or sister, they ask you stuff, and you have to tell them to be quiet half the time, not because it's not a good question, because you don't have the answer. All right, like I walked into a classroom once, and their grade 5 looks up at me and he goes, are you the Pope? No, because like right before, they've been talking about the Pope. So naturally, when you're 5 and you talk about the Pope, and then a stranger walks in, oh, it must be the Pope, right? And I said, no, I'm here to give a speech to your teachers. And he says, what's a speech? I do like 200 a year, and I got stumped on that. So finally, I went, it's a chance to change minds. And then my brain went, nice. And then this kid goes, how do you know you should? And I'm like, well, you need to leave school before we wreck you, all right? So like, you guys are so awesome, but I'm like, oh my God, I got to catch a plane at 10, and you keep clapping. I'm like, now so what if a 4-year-old came up to you and said, what does kindness mean? What does integrity mean? Like, these are words that we use all the time, but if you have to explain it to someone else, we don't even really know what they mean. I went home that night and asked myself the same question, and I came up with a list of like 35, and this is just some of them. And for every word I put down, I then asked, what if that girl walked up to me and said, I've never heard the word self-respect or accountability or friendship before? Can you explain it to me in the simplest terms possible in English? And given 5 to 10 minutes, like so many of you, I could come up with the best definitions for every single one of those words. But I was 28 years old, and it was the first time I'd ever done it. And I'd spent the better part of 2.5 decades evaluating myself as a student, as a professional, as a friend, and as a human being based on how well I lived these values. And more importantly, I judged other people negatively when I thought they didn't live these values, and I had no idea what they actually meant. It's why I think in the face of all of the things you're going to be questioned on in your time here, I think we have got to make sure that before we even start, we take the time to define the things that we want to define us, because if you don't, you will always feel like there's something wrong with you. Because let's say you want to embody respect every day of your life. Like, if you want to embody respect every day of your life, but you never defined it, you haven't made it into a goal so you know when you hit it, you could be embodying respect every single day, and you have never given yourself permission to celebrate that fact about yourself. Like, it is the celebrations in our lives that give us momentum, that give us pride, that give us strength, that help us get through difficult times. It's the celebrations that do it. And I think that setting goals is basically planning celebrations. And we set goals for our academic life, for our careers, and for our financial life. I would argue that leadership is making sure you set just as many goals for your character as well. Because if you don't, it becomes incredibly hard to answer a really, really important question. Hi, how are you doing? In the blonde hair. Like, in the blonde hair. Like, she picked it out this morning, all right? Like, may I ask you a question? Okay. It says, this whole group is like, okay. I know, I'm sorry. I know it's your first day. I usually pick on like the leaders, but they're hidden in the back behind the spotlights. Why do you matter? There's just all 3 of them working together now, just like one of you. All right? I already picked on her. Why do you matter? Why do you matter? Sucks, doesn't it? Here's the thing. I have asked hundreds of people that question over the years, from grade 6s, tons of university students, the CEOs of multinational corporations, hundreds of them. And by every objective measure, they are some of the most successful, some of them are famous, wildly successful people on the planet. 90% of the people I ask, why do you matter, can't give me an answer, and if they do, they're obviously making it up on the spot. And I, a decade and a half in higher education, had to start asking every educator I met, how on earth do we have the gall to call what we're doing in education when some of the most well-educated, passionate, dynamic, extraordinary young people on the planet can't answer the question, why do you matter? Because no one's ever asked you before. And no one's ever made clear how important it is that you ask yourself that every day, and you keep being willing to come up with new answers. Please, if you don't know, ask your best friend, because they have a great answer for you. Ask your best friend why they matter, because if they don't have an answer, you're going to be the catalyst that helps them come to one. I think one of the reasons we have such a hard time answering it is that we hope to matter, and we hope to be leaders, and we hope to make a difference in the world. And hope is a wildly powerful force, and you should foster it in your life and the lives of everyone that you touch. But hope is a lousy strategy. And if you want to lead, if you want to matter, if you want to make a difference, you have to plan to lead, you have to plan to matter, and you have to plan to make a difference. I think too much we hope for things in our lives, and the strategy we're using to get the things we want, grades, relationships, jobs, happiness, is hope. Hope's a lousy strategy. You want those things, you got to plan for them. Let me give you a strategy for how to on one of your first days. 3 steps, your first homework assignment. 1, actually identify your core values. Write them down. Your brain works differently when you write things down. Then, for every one you write down, define what it means. How would you explain it to that 4-year-old? How would you explain it to that girl who said, English is not my first language? When you do those 2 first steps, what you're doing is you're creating a list of criteria that you can pull out and use to make every decision in your life. Because it's a criteria of what matters to you. And instead of looking at decisions and going, what will happen if I do this, you can say, who will I be if I do this? You can hold up the option and say, which of these options is most consistent with these values? And if you haven't done those 2 steps, what criteria have you been using to make decisions in your life so far? Good leaders do that. Good leaders live their values every time the opportunity presents itself. Where great leaders separate themselves from good leaders is that good leaders live their values every time they get a chance. Great leaders, they create opportunities to live their values every single day. There was a group of students at U of T who helped me create a process that now I teach to some of the biggest companies in the world. And one of them came in, and he said one of the most extraordinary things, and I don't know where he heard it, but he said it is a lot easier to live up to an ideal. Sorry, it's a lot easier to stand up to an ideal than it is to live up to it. It's a lot easier to stand up to things than it is to live up to them. And he said, I want to actually create a plan to live up to the things I want to stand for. So we did this process. Step 1, pick a value, something that you want to embody every day. They picked impact, my students. We said, how would we explain it? And after a lot of argument and working on it together, we came up with impact is creating moments that cause people to walk away feeling as if they are better off for having interacted with you. And what they did at first is at the end of every day, we get together in my office and we talk about how we've done that. The problem is we realized, you know what we were doing? We were using our values to evaluate behavior we'd already done. We wanted our values to drive our behavior, to change our behavior. And so we came up with a different approach. We said, let's create a question. A question that if you create it properly, every time you answer it, you'll embody impact. And then we'll make a personal obligation to ourselves to ask the question and answer it every day. You all have a lot of obligations now, even more than you had a couple of days ago. You got to get to class on time. You got to hand in essays. You got to study for tests. You got to work your part-time job. Some of you have to take care of little brothers, little sisters, maybe elderly grandparents. You have lots of obligations, and you should be proud of them, and you should meet them. But here's the thing. If every obligation you have in your life is to some other person, it is hard to feel like you are in charge of your own life. It is hard to feel like you are a leader in your own life. Leaders make obligations to themselves every day, to be the people that they want to be. Because I'll tell you, as students, you're not always in charge of what you have to do every day, but you're always in charge of who you are. But we've got a plan to take advantage of that power and to strengthen and to flex it and to give ourselves confidence that you may not be in charge of what you do every day or what happens to you, but you're always in charge of who you are. And so we said, even if 90% of our obligations are to other people, we will have 10% of our obligation a given day to us. And one of them will be this question. And every day we will make sure that we answer, what have I done today to recognize someone else's leadership? Because we said 9 times out of 10, if you can answer that question, you had impact in the process. And it started to change things right away. A few days after we created the question, I found myself in a grocery store on a Saturday afternoon. Never go to a grocery store on a Saturday afternoon. All right, everyone is there. 25-person line, And I got in line, I looked to the end, and at the end of the line was the single greatest cashier I have ever seen. Like she was a ninja, like slash octopus, all right? Like everything she threw at the scanner, and she threw everything at once, beeped. And I never seen anyone this good. And as soon as I thought it, I reflected, that is the weirdest thing to think, because the more people in our society that can do a job, the less likely we are to recognize excellence in that job. Like if you're a musician or an athlete or a business person, websites, magazines, arguing over the top 50 of all time. The cashier, the waitress, the bartender, the person driving the cabs, the bus driver, the front desk receptionist, and way too often nurses, teachers. Anybody can do that without a lot of effort, so we don't bother to recognize the people who do it with tremendous skill. And that question was in my head though. And I said, this is my chance to actually answer it. So I said, when I get to the end of this line, I'm going to tell this woman that she is the greatest cashier I've ever seen. And I think that that's leadership. Yeah. And then for 25 minutes, everyone in line was mean to her. Because when you're in line, you're just miserable, right? Like it just and you start maybe you guys don't, but everyone in that line started making that noise when you're pissed off at how long it's taking, but you don't want to have to make eye contact. And then, I'm so sorry to all of you who work in the service industry from what I'm about to do, but one of the guys goes, hey, honey. I know. Everyone in the service industry should be allowed to taser one person a year. No penalty. There are a lot of waiters and waitresses in this room. So when I got to the front of the line, she was ready to snap. Like she was obviously so upset. And I said, okay, I can't just say something nice to her. I have to do something nice. So I turned to the counter, the candy counter, and I'm like, excuse me, which of these chocolates do you think are the best? And she snaps at me. She goes, the caramels. There's a set of words in the English language you never expect to get snapped at you in anger. Caramels is on that list, all right? Like, seriously, there are some words that just sound weird. Like fluffy. Bubbles. No one's ever been like, goddamn kittens. So many kittens. And so when you hear like caramels, you just... And she beeps them through, and she goes to put them in my bag. And I'm like, actually, no, you look like you're having a really bad day, and you were so good at your job. Like, I just thought you should have some chocolates. I wanted to make her smile. Like $2 to make her smile. She starts to cry. Not what I was going for. Because no one heard the exchange. They just see crying woman and dude across from her, right? Now, I'm Canadian. And like most of the Canadians in this room, I have apologized to an inanimate object I've tripped over, all right? Like, all of you have said sorry to a chair, all right? Like, oh, I'm sorry. So I go into an apology fit. Like, you never actually apologize. You just start to 12 times. Like, oh my God, I can't, oh my. And she finally just goes, wait, it's just that no one has even been polite to me today, and you bought me chocolates. I just don't know how to deal with it. And I thought it'd be like one of those nothing, like nice little moments where like you just do it and it kind of disappears into the ether. Like when you buy coffee for the person behind you at Tim Hortons, like, oh, you nod like you do it all the time. You did it once 4 years ago. And you've been coasting on it ever since, okay? Like, everybody in this room buy coffee for the person behind you once in your first month here. I thought it'd be like just one of those forget-nothing moments, but I thought about it, and I realized that when she goes home at the end of the day, like, before that moment, like, when her family asked, how was your day, she was going to snap at them and make their day worse. Now, I bet even if nothing else good happened all day, she leads with, this guy did the nicest thing for me. And it was so easy. And that question made me do it. And it made me start looking for those moments every day, because here's the thing. There are so many of those moments available to us in our classes, in our friendships, in our jobs. And for some reason, we don't go looking for them. We spend our days chasing something else that doesn't even offer that kind of gratification for ourselves or other people. I don't even know what it is. We're trying to do things that will impress someone we haven't met yet, instead of just taking a moment and being like, what could I do to change this person a little bit? And it kind of blew me away and how easily it worked. Like, imagine this. In your time at Dal, imagine how different this world would be if you just assumed that everyone you interacted with in the course of the day had not had a single person be nice to them. Like, wouldn't that change how you interacted with other people if you just assumed absolutely everyone you talked to, everyone else all day has been a dick to them? Like, it'd be kind of exciting to be able to be the one person who pulls their day out of a spin. Just act like that every day. Like, there's so much of that leadership we're not jumping on. Because honestly, every single one of you is so proud of someone in your life, right? But when was the last time the phrase, I am so proud of you, actually escaped your lips? That's an example of the leadership that's completely within all our power, and we just don't take care of it. This works so well that we started to do it for a bunch of questions. What will yours be? Pick your values, your definitions, and then pick a question that in all the questions you're going to answer for other people over your time here, pick the ones that you'll answer for yourself every day, because even on the days where everything outside of your control blows up in your face, you'll still be in charge of doing those things. And even on the days where you lose, because we will lose some days, you can say, I got four questions that matter to me. Let me give you the 6 that drive my life very quickly. How have I recognized someone else's leadership today for impact? What have I done today to make it more likely I will learn something? What have I done today to make it more likely someone else will learn something? I'm 37 years old. I've been to the funerals of 17 of my friends. I've been to only 7 of their weddings. And I talk about my friends that I've lost in these presentations not to make you sad, but because none of them saw their 24th birthday. And yet I stand in front of Disney and Microsoft and Google and the best universities in the world, and I talk about the lessons they taught me because they mattered. And so do you. And how old you are, how much money you make, how smart you think you are, how you've been graded your whole life has absolutely no bearing on your ability to teach people something. Pick what you can teach and put it out in the world every single day. What positive thing have I said about someone to their face today? This is so easy that I think that we go through a lot of days where we figure we'll just get to it naturally, and we never do it. What positive thing have I said about someone who isn't even in the room? However you talk about people who are not in the room, research shows everyone who is in the room assumes you talk about them the same way, even if they're not consciously aware of it. You destroy respect and trust in yourself every time you say something negative about someone who is not present. Don't do it. Build into your life every day, say something positive about someone who's not in the room. The people who are in the room will start to assume you act like that and say things like that about them, and you would be amazed at how much it changes your influence, positive influence on other people. The last value that I try to embody every day in my life through a question, self-respect. What does self-respect mean? Self-respect means honestly believing you have as much right to happiness in your life as anyone else does. That you cannot add happiness to anyone else's life till you've added enough to your own. And 3, that no one's more responsible for your happiness than you are. I do not understand how we expect professors, boyfriends, girlfriends, parents, bosses, or the universe to do something for us that we are not willing to do for ourselves, and that is to treat ourselves well. Here's the thing. As students, I cannot believe how proud you are of how long it's been since you slept. Like, you will, at one point this year, probably this week, you will have a little, how screwed over tired am I off, okay? Like, someone will be like, I haven't slept since like Tuesday. So they'll be like, I haven't slept in 4 days. I haven't slept or eaten or showered in 5 days. Like, it's like a badge of honor, right? I forgot my boyfriend's name. Like, whatever it is, right? But like, it's this one-up. Guess what? When you do that, what you're saying to people is, look at how terrible I treat myself. Feel free to treat me the exact same way. So the question that I built into my life is, what have I done today to be good to myself? And guess what? Happiness has to be cultivated. So if you want to be happy tomorrow, make a plan today for something. Like, put the picture of someone you really love, all right? And if you don't have that person in your life, may I highly suggest Jennifer Lawrence. She's adorable, all right? Okay? Put a quote that makes you laugh on the back of your dorm room door, so the last thing you see as you go out. Those are little things that you take control of to add just one more piece of positive value to your life. For me, every photograph in this presentation, which used to just be a black screen with white font on it, every photo I took, every photo in this presentation is a moment in time where I was happy and peaceful and joyous. I love what I do. I hope that's coming through loud and clear. But I also, one day, by asking that question, added 25 moments where I'm taken back in time while I speak to you and looked at these amazing moments in my life. And I did that. What are you going to do every day to add a little bit more happiness to yours? That's 6 questions. 4 to add value to other people, 2 to add value to yourself. If you pick 6 questions like that, tied to your core values, and you aim to answer them every day, not just your professor's questions, but your own, you will add 2,190 additional pieces of value to your life every year, tied to the core things that you want to stand for. If you add 2,190 conscious pieces of value to your life a year, your marks get better, your relationships get better, and your life gets better. And creating a plan to make your grades, to make your relationships, and to make your life better, honestly, that is the very definition of leadership. And before I close off today, let me just tell you one thing I think is really important. While you're here, you should work incredibly hard to make your grades extraordinary. All right? Your grades will open doors for you. Your grades will kick down doors for you. Your transcript is an incredibly important part of your life. It is not a measure of your worth as a human being. And I am tired of watching incredible, passionate, caring, dynamic young people start to believe that because they are a C student, they are somehow a C person. Make a commitment to yourself today that you will never allow a letter or a number that appears in the top right-hand corner of a piece of paper to make you feel like you are less of a human being than you are. Make a commitment to never let your friends, people you fundamentally know are tremendous people of worth, to let themselves think they are less than that because one professor or one TA said you didn't give me what I wanted. And that's what grades are, how well you gave one professor or one TA what they wanted that day. You should work incredibly hard to make your grades extraordinary. Don't deny that. But here's what I wish was in 15-foot letters on the wall of every school in the world. Work incredibly hard to make your grades extraordinary. Then work twice as hard to make sure that they are the least impressive thing about you. And if you make that your mission in education, I swear to you, success will follow you all the days of your life. If we consciously decide to add value, the great thing that happens is you start to unconsciously add value. And I'll close with a story that opened my eyes to the power of the unconscious value add. That if you're the person that you're proud of, you start to do things that you didn't even realize were moments of leadership. I went to Mount Allison for 7 years because I was taught that letters after your name make you smarter. When I left Mount A, it was such a big deal that they threw a campus-wide party for me. And at that party, a young girl came up to me and said, "Drew, I remember the first time I ever met you," which can be awesome or so not. And then she told me a story from 4 years earlier. And she said, 4 years ago was the night before I started school here, and I was in a hotel with my mom and my dad, and for whatever reason, I was completely ripped with an anxiety attack. I was gripped with this incredible, passionate belief that I wasn't ready for this and I couldn't do it. It was so powerful that I just started to cry. And my parents hadn't seen me cry in 8 years, but there was nowhere to hide in a hotel room. And they were amazing. They said, "Look, we know you were scared. Trust us, we are way more scared than you are. But you have worked so hard for this. You owe it to yourself to make sure that you try." So here's the deal. We go tomorrow to the first day. If at any point you think you can't do this, we take you home and we love you no matter what. But you have to try. She said they were right. So I went and I got in line on the first day. And everyone is so annoyingly perky on the first day. And they're wearing matching shirts and they're doing cheers I don't know and they're this weird thing with their hips. And she goes, "The thing is, I'm not an extrovert." And I know they were trying to make me feel welcome, but I looked around and said, this is another place where only extroverts are valued. And I will not spend 4 more years of my life in a place where you have to yell to fit in. And she said, standing in line on my first day of university, I quit. And as soon as I quit, I was overcome with an incredible feeling of peace. And I turned to my mom and my dad to say, "Take me home," just like they said they would. And before I could say anything, you came out of the nearest building wearing the stupidest hat I have ever seen. I've toned down my hats, by the way. And you had a giant sign that said, "Shinorama, students fighting cystic fibrosis." And a bucket of lollipops. And you were walking along this line of students, and you were talking about Shinorama, and you were trying to get them to do Shinorama. I was flirting with first-year girls, but if she wants to make me a Noble fundraiser, I'm down with that too, all right? And she goes, all of a sudden you got to me, and you just stopped, and you stared at me. It was creepy. Then you look at the guy next to you, I've never seen before in my life. You smile at him, you reach out with a lollipop, and you go, "Dude, you've got to give a lollipop to the incredibly beautiful woman you got to stand next to on your first day. If the universe is going to give you a chance to talk to someone like her, take it, man. Come on. Give her a lollipop." She says, "I've never seen the dude in my life, but I have never seen a human being get more embarrassed faster in my life. Because he turns so red, he won't even look at me. He just does this with the lollipop." I feel so bad for this poor guy that I take the lollipop from him. And as soon as I do, your whole demeanor changes. And you look so disappointed. And you turn to my parents and you go, "Look at your little girl. Look at your daughter. First day away from home. First day without dad and mom to take care of her. And already she's taking candy from a stranger." And she says, everybody loses it. Like for 20 feet in every direction, everybody loses it. And she goes, I don't know why, and I know this sounds cheesy, but in the moment when everybody was laughing, I changed my mind. And I just didn't quit that day. And I didn't do it the next day, and I just never did. And she goes, you know what? I haven't talked to you once in the 4 years since that happened. But I heard that you were leaving, and before that happened, I had to come up to you and tell you, you've been an incredibly important person in my life, and I'm really going to miss you. I wanted to come up and tell you good luck. And then she walks off. Never drop a story like that on someone and then walk off, all right? Because I have no idea how to deal with it. And then she turns around, comes back, and bails me out, and goes, there's one more thing you really should know. I've been dating that guy for 4 years since you introduced us that day. Oh, hold on. Wow. A year and a half after I moved to Toronto, the two of them invited me to their wedding. She married the dude. Here's the thing. I don't remember that. Like, I've searched my memory banks for that moment because I was awesome in that moment, but I have no recollection of that moment. And that was such an eye-opener for me, and it has been for my whole life, to realize that maybe the biggest moment of leadership in my life, maybe the biggest impact I had in another human being, like a moment that had a complete stranger walk up to me 4 years later and say, you've been an incredibly important person in my life, it's a moment that I didn't even remember. And I try to remind every audience, most of whom keep their hands down, that I think we spend so much time, so much money, and so much stress to try to achieve things and acquire things that will make people look at us and say there's a leader, that make us feel like we have the right to put up our hand and call ourselves a leader, that we sometimes lose fundamental sight of the fact that the primary determinant of how other people view us and how we feel about ourselves is how we behave on a day-to-day basis. How many of you have what I would refer to as a lollipop moment in your life? A moment where someone came up and out of nowhere did something incredibly wonderful for you. By show of hands, how many of you have a lollipop moment in your life? All right. For those of you who just raised your hands, how many of you have told the person who created that moment that they created it for you? It's like less than half, which I don't understand. Like, we live in a world where you celebrate birthdays and all we have to do is not die for 365 days and you get a cake. But we let people walk around who fundamentally made our life better and we don't tell them that. Look, this is the thing I think we have to do. If you get nothing else from me today, please tell the people who made your life better that they made your life better. And all of you create lollipop moments. And if you don't think you do, think of the hands that didn't go back up. You're just one of the people who hasn't been told yet. But you know, it's scary to think we can matter that much. Like, I recognize it's almost frightening to believe that you can have that kind of impact when you're not paying attention. Because as long as we keep leadership something bigger than us, as long as we keep leadership something beyond us, as long as we keep leadership about changing the world, what we are doing is we are giving ourselves permission to not expect it from ourselves and from each other every day. Marianne Williamson put it perfectly when she said, our greatest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our greatest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light and not our darkness that frightens us. Because your light, it is an obligation. And if you use it today and you don't tomorrow, you've got to live with the fact that you left something on the table. So let's live up to that obligation. Let's create it for ourselves. Let's make leadership being about lollipop moments. How many of them you create, how many you say thank you for, and how many of them you pay forward. Because somewhere along the line, we convince people that leadership is about changing the world, and there is no world. There's just 7 billion understandings of it. And that means every time you change one person's understanding of the world, one person's understanding of what they're capable of, one person's understanding of how many people care about them, one person's understanding of how powerful an agent for change they can be in this world, and sometimes more importantly, how powerful an agent for change they can be in their own lives. Every time you change one person's understanding of the world, you have changed the whole world. That's not beneath any of us. It's not beyond any of us. You do it every day. Raise your hand and take credit for it, because that, I think, is the very essence of leadership. And I think that if we can teach leadership like that, embrace leadership like that, learn that leadership is that, I think that we can change everything. And I think that it is a simple idea, but that doesn't mean that it is a small one. And I hope that you live it every day that you're a tiger. Thank you so, so much for letting me come back to Halifax. Peace, and have a great time, guys. Thank you. Thanks so much. Thank you. Thank you very, very much.